Here's the most American story you'll hear today. A restaurant chain did not die because customers stopped coming. It died because it sold the ground beneath its feet, then spent a decade paying rent to a company that was running an accounting fraud. May 13, 2024. Red Lobster workers across the country woke up to a notification on their scheduling app. Not a shift change, a pink slip, no warning, no meeting. Just these words. You are not required to report to work. Even the managers found out at 8 in the morning that Monday. 6,500 people gone. The media blamed endless shrimp. $11 million in losses, they said. But that is not what killed Red Lobster. What killed them was a real estate deal worth $1.5 billion in 2014. A deal with 2% rent increases baked in forever, signed with a landlord who would be charged with fraud 5 months later. They did not die from shrimp. They bled out through rent. Rewind to 2013. Red Lobster was hemorrhaging customers. Comparable sales were down 4.5% in the second quarter and 8.8% in the third quarter. The kind of bleeding that makes Wall Street circle like sharks. Enter Jeff Smith, Starboard Value. He owned 5.5% of Darden, Red Lobster's parent company, and he had opinions. Loud ones. The kind that come with PowerPoint decks and proxy fights. Darden's CEO needed a solution fast. On May 16, 2014, Golden Gate Capital agreed to buy Red Lobster for $2.1 billion. Problem solved, the activist was neutralized. Except Darden did something strange. They threw in all the real estate. 473 properties Red Lobster owned outright. Buildings, parking lots, land, gone. The deal was priced at 9 times EBITDA, a rich multiple for a company whose earnings were already shrinking. They were selling a declining business at a premium by stapling real estate to it. Jeff Smith was livid. Wall Street analyst Mark Kalinowski summed up the disaster in 7 words. Who knew lobsters had middle fingers? Shareholders revolted. Within months, they voted out Darden's entire board. Every single director was gone, but the damage was done. Red Lobster was sold, and the real estate was part of the package. Golden Gate Capital had just bought a restaurant chain the way you would buy a house, by figuring out how to flip the land underneath it. The deal that unlocked value had just unlocked a decade of decline. 2 months after buying Red Lobster, Golden Gate Capital sold 500 restaurant properties to American Realty Capital Properties for $1.5 billion. That was 71% of what they had just paid for the entire chain. It was instantly back in their pocket. The properties were sold below replacement cost according to the press release, and they were also described as irreplaceable locations with the high-quality real estate. Quite a trick being both irreplaceable and cheap. Here's the math. Golden Gate paid $2.1 billion. They got $1.5 billion back from the real estate sale. Net cost was $600 million. Then, in 2016, they sold 25% to Thai Union, a shrimp supplier, for $575 million. Effective cost to own America's largest seafood chain? $25 million. Red Lobster got to keep one thing: the privilege of paying rent forever. The leases averaged 25 years with 2% annual rent increases, compounding. If rent starts at 100, by year 10, it is 122. By year 20, it is 149. By year 25, it is 64% more than you started, whether sales went up or down. They were triple net leases. Red Lobster paid rent plus property taxes, insurance, and maintenance. The landlord just collected checks. Jonathan Mays at Restaurant Finance Monitor saw it immediately. He said the deal gave Red Lobster little room for error. By 2017, Moody's downgraded them for persistently high leverage. Golden Gate exited completely in August 2020 in the middle of the pandemic, announcing they had achieved strong returns for our investors. Strong returns for them. For Red Lobster, paying rent on buildings they used to own to a landlord they did not choose, under terms they could not escape, while the restaurant industry collapsed. Now let me tell you about American Realty Capital Properties, run by Nicholas Schorsch, worth $1.5 billion according to Forbes, the king of non-traded REITs. His companies raised $25.5 billion between 2008 and 2014, a quarter of the entire industry. He bought Red Lobster's properties in May 2014. 5 months later, ARCP dropped a bomb, a $23 million accounting error, intentionally uncorrected by executives. Intentionally uncorrected. The chief accounting officer and CFO were fired immediately. Stock tanked 33%. By December, Schorsch resigned. His empire crumbled. Another Schorsch company bankrupted in 2016. In 2019, Schorsch settled with the SEC for over $60 million. Brian Block, the CFO, was convicted of fraud. 18 months in prison. Lisa McAllister pled guilty to securities fraud. Vanguard sued for $90 million, alleging a multi-year fraud. Their complaint said Schorsch's true primary purpose was to rob from shareholders and give to himself and his friends. Forbes revised his net worth from $1.5 billion to $500 million. ARCP renamed itself Verite, eventually acquired by Realty Income. Like washing blood off with a name change, Red Lobster did not just get trapped by a bad real estate deal. They got trapped by a real estate company running a fraud that collapsed within years. The company that was supposed to unlock value was itself a house of cards. And Red Lobster, still paying rent. 25-year terms, 2% increases, no escape clause even when the landlord turned out to be a criminal. By 2023, Red Lobster was paying $190 million a year in rent. For context, that is $190 million more than they paid when they owned the buildings. $64 million of that, a third, went to underperforming stores they could not afford to close because they were locked into those beautiful 25-year leases. The sale-leaseback had created $177 million in additional annual expenses compared to ownership. That is the actual number, not revenue lost to changing consumer tastes, not increased food costs, just the privilege of renting what they used to own. And then it got worse. In 2020, as the pandemic crushed the restaurant industry, Red Lobster got a new owner, Thai Union, their biggest shrimp supplier for 20 years. A seafood company that saw an opportunity to own one of America's largest seafood chains. Thai Union did not have the first clue about running restaurants. Red Lobster burned through 5 CEOs in 5 years. Former employees described a toxic environment. Paul Kenny, the Thai Union-appointed interim CEO, made derogatory comments about staff. Les Foreman, a division vice president who had been there 20 years, said that it was miserable working there for the last year and a half. When Red Lobster finally filed for bankruptcy, the media had a field day. Endless Shrimp killed Red Lobster. The promotion lost $11 million. $11 million. Let us do the math. $177 million in extra rent divided by $11 million in shrimp losses equals 16. The rent burden was 16 times worse than Endless Shrimp. And here's the twist. Red Lobster is now investigating whether Thai Union, the supplier turned owner, forced them to run the Endless Shrimp promotion and possibly charged above market prices for the shrimp itself. A supplier owning its customer. What could go wrong? In February 2024, Thai Union stopped providing capital. It announced it would divest at a $530 million loss. Over $500 million. Gone. And those leases are still there, still compounding at 2%, still 25 years long, still impossible to escape. The trap had closed completely. Monday, May 13th, 2024. Workers checking their phones before heading to their shift saw a notification. Not a schedule change. A termination. The app simply said, "Locations closing. You are not required to report." 100 restaurants, 6,500 workers. No meeting, no phone call, not even an email. Just a push notification. Even the managers did not know until 8 a.m. that Monday. One worker posted that Red Lobster had just laid all of them off without notice. Another worker said they were trying so hard to put on a smile and felt like they could break at any moment. A third worker said that what Red Lobster did in New York was illegal and that they closed their doors with no warning. The common thread was no notice. Here is the detail that tells you everything about the priorities. They closed the restaurants the day after Mother's Day, May 12th, one of the biggest revenue days of the year. They squeezed out every last dollar, then turned off the lights Monday morning. A former manager said that doing it after Mother's Day was probably the slimmiest thing they could have done. The WARN Act requires 60 days notice for mass layoffs. Red Lobster gave 0. Former employee Donna Lowe filed a class action lawsuit 2 days before the bankruptcy. In California alone, 300 workers were laid off without warning. On May 19th, Red Lobster filed Chapter 11. 36,000 employees were affected. Guest counts were down 30% from 2019. The bankruptcy filing admitted what everyone knew. A material portion of the company's leases are priced above market rates. In September, Fortress Investment Group won the auction with a $376 million bid. It was the only competitive bid. They promised $60 million in new investment. A fresh start. In December, Red Lobster laid off 200 more people, mostly managers, right before Christmas. Reddit filled with posts from people who had survived the May layoffs, whose bonuses were delayed, and then were gone again. The company said they were building a stronger, more agile business, but they were still struggling with what they called legacy lease agreements. These were leases they could not renegotiate even in bankruptcy because they were part of master agreements covering multiple locations. Even in bankruptcy, the leases haunt them. Red Lobster's story is not unique. It is a playbook. Toys R Us had a $6.6 billion leveraged buyout in 2005. KKR, Bain Capital, and Vornado loaded the company with $5 billion in debt. $400 million a year went just to interest payments. They sold the real estate in sale-leasebacks to fund the deal. Sound familiar? Toys R Us was profitable before the debt. 1 in 5 toys sold in America came from that chain. 30,000 workers lost their jobs. They were initially denied severance and eventually got $60 per person for full-time employees. $60 for losing everything. The numbers tell the story. Between 2015 and 2017, 40% of retail bankruptcies were private equity-owned chains. 61% of all retail job losses were tied to private equity. Companies backed by private equity are 10 times more likely to go bankrupt. In the first quarter of 2025, 70% of large bankruptcies, those with over $1 billion in liabilities, were private equity-backed. Payless, The Limited, Wet Seal, Gymboree, Claire's, Bed Bath & Beyond. Different names, same story. Sale-leasebacks, long leases, escalators, debt, collapse. And here is what makes it inescapable. Even bankruptcy cannot always fix it. Red Lobster, in 2025, was still struggling with legacy leases they could not renegotiate. The trap outlives the company. Nicholas Schorsch's net worth went from $1.5 billion to $500 million.